Looking at our Scars of Mirrodin block
He's gonna go there
review.
soon. Go to bed.
So we're going to be looking at the second set in the block, Mirrodin Besieged, today. So this was quite the interesting set, and they sort of reintroduced the plane, saw some rumblings of things possibly going wrong still under the surface in Scars of Mirrodin.
Hey, and Larry.
In Mirrodin Besieged is when things start to go nuts. And you get the real war for the plane between the local Mirrans and the Phyrexians. And as I recall, when you went to the pre-release, they had special pre-release kits or boosters. I think it was boosters that were themed based on factions. So the crests on the cards, basically. You had Mirren-themed boosters or you had Phyrexian-themed, and you got to pick which faction you were playing as. And I think they even had a poll trying to decide, who should prevail in set 3 for the block. So there's some of the products they had there. You had the intro packs, which came with a pre-constructed deck and a booster pack, I believe. And on this side, it's showcasing the bundles, basically. Fat pack, they called it then. Which, back then came with a little storybook, which would give you some of the background story. You know what? I'm going to flip this camera to make it a little easier. And rotate this down so we can start looking at the cards more easily. So, steel yourself for war. The full force of Phyrexia has been unleashed, and the metallic world of Mirrodin will never be the same. Mirrans fight for their lives against a swarm of toxic Phyrexians, killing machines. Shining heroes cross blades with corroded horrors. The fate of the plane hangs in the balance. Which side will you command? And, yeah.
So I'm so sorry for that.
Yeah, unfortunately, Brinley is
so loud.
Yeah. So there's what the box looked like. This is just full of basically commons and things. And then you had
of the 8-pack avatar box. 8-pack avatar box for $30. Hello, founder, and I'm assuming
Sounds
Koi.
good.
How are you doing tonight?
So they had these rule cards in there for the different new features. This was card 1 for Battle Cry. So Mirren creatures with Battle Cry have an inspiring presence on the battlefield. Whenever a creature with Battle Cry attacks, all other attacking creatures get +1 attack until end of turn. The creatures keep the bonus even if the creature with Battle Cry leaves combat.
I am doing okay.
And then, it just goes on with details. I'm not going to read all these. But I'll show you briefly what they were. Card number 2 were Metalcraft. Metalcraft, again, gave different sort of active abilities and reduced costs. Sort of a fixed version, or so they thought, of Affinity, I believe. And then Rule Tips Imprint. And again, Imprint is another ability that goes back to original Mirrodin. Then you've got Rule Tips Living Weapon. Living Weapon were equipment, which made a germ token that would attach to it. Similar to, what's it called now? Now they make a 1/1 token that equips to it for recent sets. It's a different ability. The name escapes me right now. Rule Tip Infect. Now, Infect was one of the most... Thank you very much, Founder. That's awesome. Infect was one of the most impactful abilities that came out in this block. It was their way of fixing poison. We saw a lot of creatures in the previous set that were sort of 1/1 Infect for 2.
Charlie forgot how to spell. Or
that's fine.
Mistyped. That's okay. We'll
and
forgive
so a lot of these were repeated, and then you've got again Proliferate for increasing counters, whatever type they are, whether they're poison counters or -1/-1 counters or whatever. proliferating things was like the thing.
Hi, Sukat. Where's Sukat now?
This is right in the way here.
So what would the extra O be changed from P?
This will
Is
not
there another
work.
word that means
Like that.
pieces that starts with an O?
This is awful. Let's see if I can adjust this a little better.
Shiny objects?
I don't know. The and things covers a lot. That light is in an awful position.
I don't.
Anyway,
Oops.
start off looking at the Quarters Paladin. So here's an example of
It's
battle
a new
cry.
channel.
I fight for the suns, the surface, and everything in between. So this was a nice little 3-1 with battle cry for 2. You know, at the time, that was a fairly aggressive creature. White had those, and as it was, and we've got an ardent recruit. We lost our homes and our kin. We won't lose. We won't let those rotters take our future as well. So yeah, they were trying to take over the plane. Now you'll recall from Scars of Mirrodin, the Phyrexian affiliation cards with the symbol there showed up mainly in black and green, and some in blue. I think blue was a little toned down, but white and red had basically no impact of them initially.
James is asking, is that a one of one card or one card? I don't know what he means by that.
1/1 card. The Ardent Recruit, that's power and toughness at the bottom. It's 1 power, 1 toughness for combat stats. That's what those were. These were long before serialized cards, if that's what you're referring to. So, but yeah. Serialized cards, I'm not a huge fan of, but it's an interesting concept just for the collectors. But I'd prefer to collect for flavor. Unworthy of Consecration.
Phyrexia?
Asher, Lesser Symbiote.
This is Phyrexia.
Banishment Decree. So, yeah. So this was the war where Phyrexians were trying to take over the plane of Mirrodin. So the whole set is divided between Mirrodin faction cards and Phyrexian faction cards. So this symbol is the symbol for Phyrexia. And basically it's because when Mirrodin was created by Karn.
You on the new channel, Sukat.
Karn didn't realize that his exposure to Phyrexia in the past had left traces of oil. It didn't bother him much initially for a number of reasons, but when he made this world, unfortunately, he left some of those traces, and over time they grew and started to take over. You really don't see much or any of that in the original Mirrodin block, but with Scars of Mirrodin block in here, especially now when we hit the second set, Mirrodin Besieged, things really start to come to a head. Choking Fumes, put a -1/-1 counter on each attacking creature. Fall to your knees and welcome our embrace. Priest of Norn. I'm going to fly through some of these. Some of these I'm going to have more to say about when they get into important story points. Divine Offering is a card that goes right back to Legends. I always liked to, when I was building decks in the past, instead of just running a play set of Disenchant, which was pretty good, artifacts were more common than enchantments, so I like to throw this in to get some extra life as well. So I'd run like 3 Disenchants and 1 Divine Offering, or 2 and 2 sometimes if it was a very heavy artifact. But the Phyrexians are vulnerable. Do not despair. We will prevail. Next, we've got a Frantic Salvage. We will mourn when there is time. For now, we survive. So put any number of target artifact cards from your graveyard on top of your library and draw a card. Then we have a Gore Vassal. Phyrexian Hound 3 for a 2/1 creature. You can sacrifice it to put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Then, if that creature's toughness is 1 or greater, regenerate it. So, oops. So that's an interesting combination of abilities. You're shrinking a creature but allowing it to regenerate. So, rid them of their unfaithful organs. Bring new hearts to the unbelievers.
Looks like one of the Transformers. Says Jays.
Kind of. Now, this isn't the usual art you'll see on this.
I like
this.
That
Is one of the pre-release cards. It's got stamped with the date. This was January 30th, 2011 was when this set was having its pre-release tournaments. And I believe, again, with the two factions, this was the faction you got for the Mirrodin promo. And the other faction, I have one of them as well, and we'll get to that later in the set.
And they don't stamp the pre-release promos anymore.
No, they don't. They gave that up, I think, with Lorwyn. Was the first set that they didn't have stamps for.
That was the first.
And before that, they only, like, for the last couple of years or so, they would only stamp them with the year. They didn't have the specific date.
Yeah.
So, they've also changed. Like I said, for this set, you had the Mirrodin faction or the Phyrexian faction. You had to pick one. If you went with the Mirrodins, you got this one. If you went with the Phyrexians, you got the other promo. And it was just the two promos. Before this set, when you went, for example, with the original Mirrodin block, the promos were the Sword, Shield, and Helm of Keldra for the 3 sets in the block. And everybody got the same promo. That's why they didn't allow them to use it in decks. But sometime after this, I'm not sure when that started, the pre-release promos, they started making it randomized so there could be either a selection of or any rare in the set, basically. And so there were a lot more options of what you could get, but everyone wasn't getting the same thing. There's pros and cons to that. I kind of like everybody sharing a specific memory of an event, but that's just me. So again, a battle cry creature, 3/4 for 4, and whenever a hero of Bladehold attacks, put 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens on the battlefield tapped and attacking. So it makes you some more soldiers. It's a human knight, but in the right deck, it can get some tokens going for you. And that works combos nicely with the battle cry. Then you've got Kemba's Legion. So again, you've got the Leonin cat soldiers there. The squabble over succession was quickly replaced by the struggle to survive. And this is a 4/6 for 7 vigilance, and it can block an additional creature for each equipment attached to it. So, again, we're talking about how the two-headed giant earlier could block an extra creature. Well, that gains a similar ability with the amount of equipment you use. Now, equipment was introduced in the first Mirrodin block. We'll get into that a little bit later, but there were some interesting mistakes made at the time, and they balanced things a little bit better since, although power creep is always a thing. Leonin Relic Warder. So 2/2, and again, Mirrodin faction. For 2 white, when it enters the battlefield, you may exile target artifact or enchantment, and when it leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to the battlefield. So, temporarily being a 2/2 for 2 that gets something out of the way while it's around. And if you like your 2/2 for 2 cats, here's a flying one.
When is the the Hobbit set coming out again?
I think it's in August.
Okay.
So here's your Sky Hunter. The infection has spread farther than we could glimpse from the heights of Tajnar. So they get up there and start
Ryan.
skidding
How
around
you
and
doing?
realize how big a problem they had what seemed to be a new annoying faction had taken over half the planet very quickly. Or plane, I should say. Loxton Partisan. 3/4 for 5, Battle Cry. This war is not about Loxton or Leonin, Silvok or Orok. To defeat these rotters, we must do it together. And they're all into it. Now, this is definitely a smaller set. Most blocks start out with a large set and then have, two smaller sets after. I believe with this one, it basically started off with a large set, and large for the time was not as big as the huge bloated sets early on, like, the original 4th, 5th edition, Ice Age, Mirage types. They did scale them back a little from that, but it was still a fairly good sized set. Whereas the second set here was smaller for sure. And then the third set, they sort of did a medium sized set for this block to wrap up the story. Anyway, so a little bit bigger for the end, but still not as big as the first one. Master's Call. So again, Mirror and Faction put 2 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature tokens onto the battlefield. And the mirror, there was like colored mirror that were a 1/1 artifact creature for 2 that could tap to produce a color of mana for each color. A set of 5 of them in the original Mirrodin block that got repeated in Scars of Mirrodin. We showed those last time. The need to obey was inscribed on every plate in their bodies.
That's an interesting art.
It is.
I kind of like the sky and the whatever this is supposed to be, the fire or
the beacon coming down or whatever it is. Now the Mirrodin Crusader. This was an interesting one at the time. Black Knight and White Knight had always been sort of something they played off of from time to time going forward. So this Crusader here, you get a 2/2 double strike instead of first strike, protection from black and from green. Like I say, those were the 2 most corrupted colors early on. And costs 3, but still with protection from 2 colors and double strike, this was a decent body, especially if you could then equip it and grow it in other ways, give it some other bonuses. It's amazing how much protection can do for you against in the right matchup. You can't always count on it, but if you got protection from 2 colors, it does come up a lot more often. Next we have Phyrexian Rebirth. Oh, I should have read the flavor text on the last one. As long as 1 drop of the oil exists, the joyous work continues. And that was the thing. You could crush the Phyrexian creatures, but the oil that was in them and empowered them was a lot harder to get rid of. And it would tend to infect other things. Destroy all creatures, then put an XX colorless horror artifact creature token onto the battlefield, where X is the number of creatures destroyed this way.
I'm tired.
A 6-cost Wrath usually needs to give you some serious upside. Getting a big body after you just cleared the board is upside for sure, but I don't remember it being as popular as some other options. A symbol of what Mirrodin once was and hope for what it will be again was the flavor text on the Crusader. It's funny, they had no problem with keeping Crusaders around, but it was around this time, I think, that the card Crusade had its last printing, and then they banned that sucker. Anyway, Priests of Norn. So this is a Vigilance 1/4 Infect for 3. So sort of like a Yoshin Soldier, except in white and with Infect. May our blessings serve the tongues of the Forsaken. Being a defensive creature, again, Infect is great in some ways for offense or defense. It'll wear down your opponent's creatures, or poison counters become a real threat in a hurry. Then we've got Tyne Shrike, Phyrexian Bird, a new bird of prey, one that hunts sentience. And 2/1 flying Infect for 4. Most Infect creatures were costed a little higher than you'd usually expect for their stats, just because the effectiveness that Infect gave in combat was quite strong. Like, it was almost as strong as the old double strike when they first introduced double striking creatures. To get like a 2/1 double strike would cost you 4. So, Victory's Herald, 6 cost 4/4 flying. When Victory's Herald attacks, attacking creatures gain flying and lifelink until end of turn. The corruption stirred excuse me, in the heavens above, awaking a shining champion. So yeah, angels have been a recurring theme on Mirrodin block as well. White Sun Zenith. So yeah, the different suns. You may remember. Well, I guess it wasn't so big a thing in Darksteel, but in Fifth Dawn, in the original block, the 5 suns, one for each color on Mirrodin, were a major theme. And so they've brought that back here with the different Suns Zenith cards, one for each color. So again, this would be Mirrodin. After the Battle of Leet Field, the white sun crested above Tajnar, bringing hope to all who survived the carnage. Put X 2/2 white cat creature tokens onto the battlefield. Shuffle White Sun Zenith into its owner's library. And I think, yeah, these all shuffle back into their library, as I recall.
Game's not over yet. They're still playing.
Yeah. Following the Montreal Canadiens, and they're in overtime against Carolina in Game 3 of the playoffs. And here's Blue Sun Zenith right after. Again, 3 of the color. It's expensive to get going. With X, target player draws X cards, then shuffle Blue Sun Zenith into its owner's library. So, a little more expensive than a Brain Geyser, but it does shuffle itself back in, so you might, you don't need to have as many copies in your deck, I suppose. The origin query will wait. We must ensure we survive to return to it. You remember one of the cards where the poor Vidican were noticing some oil floating on the water, or not the water, the Quicksilver Sea, and going, that's interesting. It's probably not a big deal. Well, it was a big deal. Foretaste of what to come. Consecrated Sphinx and Phyrexian, blessed by the hands of Gingitaxius. So here's where we start to get more and more references as well to the different Praetors for the different 5 colors. So this is a 4/6 flyer for 6, and whenever an opponent draws a card, you may draw 2 cards. So, not a whole lot, a little smaller than a Mahamati, but that extra ability to draw you extra cards, you better have a use for it, because that could get out of hand if this thing is allowed to stick around. Now here, you've got some of the story element creeping in. Isn't that art there? That's Karn. And he came back when Scars Mirrodin, noticed something was wrong, and went down to the core to investigate and challenge the Praetors, and was sort of captured down there. So Karn's creation, now his master, is the text. And Corrupted Conscience. You control enchanted creature. Enchanted creature has infect. So he was much more influenceable, and they underestimated the strength of the forces he was going to be dealing with. Karn's story is interesting and long. I really enjoyed him as a character early on. And I haven't followed all the details going forward, but for a long time he was known as a pacifist. I think in recent sets after this block, like way down the road, he eventually sort of gives up on that, but I could be wrong. I've seen an art of him not behaving pacifistically, I'll just put it that way. But definitely a powerful character, and right from his origins, as you recall, the cards I showed last time, built to avoid a certain amount of corruption. Cryptoplasm, 3 cost 2/2 shapeshifter. Mirrodin. If left in the enemy's shape too long, it might be lost to them. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may have Cryptoplasm become a copy of another target creature. If you do, it gains this ability. So it can keep shifting, which is a nice touch. There are a couple of cards they've made that can shift their form now. Distant Memories, and there's Karn, and I think that's Vesner and Urza. In the background, the fleeting shadows of his primitive self have all but vanished. Gingitaxius Cor Augur, who is one of the Praetors. Search your library for a card, exile it, then shuffle your library. Any opponent may have you put that card into your hand. If no player does, you draw 3 cards. So it's 4 mana, which is a lot, but it's basically tutor for a card, and you'll either get that if your opponents allow it, or draw 3, which is still a good rate, but a little bit different effect for your 4 mana. Then we've got Fuel the Cause. 4 cost, counter target spell, then proliferate. 4 cost counter spell is overcosted, but proliferating is a strong effect if you have some setup for it, and you have a lot of things with counters on them to multiply. Your ideas will be discarded, and your will repurposed. The Phyrexians, yeah, very much at gaining influence over people and changing them, perfecting them, sort of Bork-ish. Mirrodin Spy, a 1/3 flyer for a 3. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may untap target creature. Accurate information is a precious commodity in times of war. Oh, hockey game is over. I hope it went well, but it's hard to say. I could see it going either way. In overtime, that's often the way it goes.
What happened?
Ryan just said the hockey game's over. So there we go.
Carolina?
I don't know. He didn't say.
Oh.
And obviously I'm not watching it right this minute. So, Mitotic Manipulation. 3 cost. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put one of those cards onto the battlefield if it has the same name as a permanent. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. They can't even comprehend nature. How could they improve it? That's a quote from Vesner. I don't know. She's freaking out big time. That one team won. Yes, that's very clarifying. Thank you, Tank. Nurok Commando, a 2/1 for 3 with Shroud, which means it can't be the target of spells. Whenever Nurok Commando deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. So, again, if you can find a way to make this sucker evasive, getting in some hits with this can get you some card advantage. Burnley. We like to do this a little bit later so that she's already settled a bit more first. Unfortunately, I have to get up early tomorrow for work, so that wasn't an option. And, of course, she's being louder than usual. Sorry about that. There's no more time for secluded study. Answers are there only for those with the courage to take them. Tank says her Hurricanes won. Well, not entirely unexpected, I'm afraid, but I was hoping it would go the other way. And they made a game of it. At one point, it almost looked like they had the lead. Then they called back the goal. But Oculus, a 1/1 for 2. Homunculus. That was a pretty rare creature type. I don't know if they've since made a bunch of them, but I can only remember a couple of them at the time. When Oculus is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may draw a card.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
She's overtired.
It was overtime, so it was going to end 3-2 one way or the other. And that gives the Canes a 2-1 series lead. In its gaze I saw no mercy, no recognition that I was worthy to exist. Then we have a Quicksilver Geyser. Phyrexians are tenacious. That's not the same thing as clever. And that's a quote from Tezzeret. Tezzeret played quite the role in this. He was introduced in the Shards of Alara block, and but he was tied to sort of an artifact people there, so I'm not surprised he had interest in Mirrodin, and unfortunately I believe he was also very subject to corruption in the end. Return up to 2 target non-land permanents to their owner's hands. 5 is a hefty cost, though. Bouncing 2 things can certainly be a strong effect, but 5 cost is a lot. Serum Raker, 4 for a 3/2 flyer. When Serum Raker is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each player discards a card. The serum from the blink moths they gathered greases the joints of which engines. So there we go. The poor old blink moths. I showed at the end of the last set there. I think it was it? Or maybe not. Maybe we haven't got there yet. Anyway. But yeah, they've been a recurring thing for Mirrodin for a while, and sadly, a lot of sad stuff in this story arc. Spire Serpent, 3/5 for 5, Defender, Metalcraft. As long as you control 3 or more artifacts, it gets +2/+2, and it can attack as though it didn't have Defender. So it does become a big threat if there's artifacts around. A mirror to draw its eye, a rod to rouse its rage, and a sword to break its bonds.
Thank you as well. Oh man, Brenda's very demanding tonight.
Sounds like. Steel Sabotage, 1 cost instant, choose 1. Counter target artifact spell, or return target artifact to its owner's hand. I kind of like this. Yeah, it's narrow because it's strictly against artifacts, but you got the choice of countering something or bouncing something. Yeah, if it's a heavy artifact format, this could be quite handy. You are hopelessly obsolete, my brothers. Come and join the great work. Yeah, again, an artifact plane, and the Phyrexians were always very involved with artifacts, shall we say. So this plane was basically a giant magnet for them once they got a foothold. Treasure Mage. Now, this is sort of a play off the old Trinket Mage from back in Mirrodin. And that was a 2/2 for 3 that could search up any artifact and put it in your hand if it cost 1 or less. Nice little tutor on a body. This one is similar, but it searches for an artifact with converted mana cost 6 or greater. Reveal it and put it into your hand. Now, that means it's getting you cards which are potentially a lot more powerful, but also a lot harder to play. So I think Trinket Mage was still preferred over Treasure Mage overall. But hey, tutoring up an artifact with a body was still worth considering in a lot of decks. Turn the Tide. Creatures your opponents control get -2 attack until end of turn. Let their mindless armies come and face the might of genius. Varel Nuruk Partisan. Very confident. Perhaps a little overconfident. Then we've got Vidican Anatomist. Corrupted by the Phyrexians. 1, 2 for 3. Can pay 3 and put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. You may tap or untap that creature. Specimen 211, examination report. Observation. Graft sublimation incomplete. Result, death. Prepare specimen 212. So yeah, all their changing and enhancements of creatures didn't always go well in their search for improvement or perfection, or it depended on which one, what their philosophy was, really. Vedekin Infuser, 1/4 for 4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a charge counter on target artifact. Could be quite handy. All plans begin as dreams. I intend to awaken them. There's lots of artifacts out there that use charge counters. This is not the most efficient way to increase them. Just having a 4-cost creature that just sits there. But it is a way. Vivisection. 4-cost sorcery is an additional cost to cast this. Sacrifice a creature. And you get to draw 3 cards for your playing a card for 4 and sacrificing a creature. Unless you were getting other benefits, that is worth it, but it's not a huge increase in value. Unless your creature sacrifice is also doing other things for you, basically. Phyrexians research with the grace of surgeons and the finesse of butchers. Then we've got the Black Sun Zenith, and again, black was the most heavily Phyrexian color. Perhaps green was close, but 2 black and X. Put X -1/-1 counters on each creature, and then shuffle this back into the library. Under the suns, Mirrodin kneels and begs us for perfection. So this is Black Sun, Phyrexian aligned. Geth, Lord of the Vault. And Geth was an influential force on Mirrodin, who I think embraced and intentionally sought out Phyrexian augmentations, shall we say. 6-cost 4/4 for the Caustic Hound. When it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each player loses 4 life. At first, the Mirrans aimed for its exposed gut. The survivors quickly learned to do otherwise. Kaboom. Yeah. Well, I guess caustic. Probably more just acid getting everywhere. Anyway. Flestermite. 1/1 infect lifelink for 2. Little gremlin.
Yeah.
Again, there are definitely some use for these in certain decks. There was no shortage of small infect creatures that cost 2 or 3 to choose from. And again, they would get bigger too with higher costs like this guy. Flesh Eater Imp. 2/2 flying infect.
That does not sound pleasant.
Well, imps are generally not very pleasant.
It's just a flesh eater.
Yeah, I know. Costs 4, and you can sacrifice a creature to give it +1/+1 until end of turn.
Oh, man.
This was a popular removal spell for quite some time, actually, that came out of this set. So, 1 and a colorless, destroy target non-artifact creature. So, the old terror effects, terror cost the same as this, but it was destroy target, it was bury with terror. They couldn't regenerate, but regeneration is far less common going forward by the time you get here. And I think this was one of the last sets to actually feature it at all for many years. So, but yeah, destroy target non-artifact creature instead of non-black non-artifact. So you could still get other black creatures with this, which made it a lot more useful. Obviously, in an artifact-centric set, the artifact is more of a penalty, but once you got out of that, this was still quite handy. Having flesh is increasingly a liability on Mirrodin, so this is one of the few vampire cards that were still aligned with those fighting against the the Phyrexian influence. And we have a gruesome encore. Again, all these zombie cards and things. Put target creature card from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next step.
Ow.
If the creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. So making sure it's gone after it's being borrowed here. Then we've got a horrifying revelation. 1 black, target player discards a card, then puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So it clears the top card off their deck and makes them discard a card. It's for 1 as a sorcery. Ours is a glorious transmission. Behold, a future where all bow to the father of machines. And that's from a priest of Shieldred.
I don't like that one.
Yeah, well, and again, the set does have some dark things to it for sure.
Good thing we do Monday Night Magic at night.
Yep. And then we've got the Massacre Worm, which is 6/5 for 6. When it enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. So sort of a one-sided pyroclasm, except with -1 or -2/-2 counters. Whenever a creature an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, that player loses 2 life. So if they have a bunch of small creatures, this comes down, wipes out a bunch of them, and they lose 2 life for each of them. That's a big chunk.
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking of Broly. If he was here, he'd be like, worms! And then I'd want to get a copy of this and send to him.
Yeah, who knows? That's actually a mythic rare, so it's a little harder to find. They had the 3 rarities by now.
That's Charlie.
Yeah. Morbid Plunder. 3-cost sorcery. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. Even the dead are raw materials for Phyrexian's vision of perfection. Then we've got a Nested Ghoul. Zombie Warrior 4/2 for 5. Whenever a source deals damage to Nested Ghoul, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. Now, if you can just ping it for 1 and do that, and ping it for 1 again the next turn and do that, you could start to use this to churn out some things, but usually with only 2 toughness, this thing's going to die pretty easily. Although, if you have a zombie master or something that can allow it to regenerate, you could do that too. The chest cavity is cleared of useless meat. I know just what to do with the space.
I only sent the gave away 5 gifted memberships.
Okay.
So I better give away the last 5.
You can do that now. Phyrexis. This was the disease that comes about from the Phyrexian oil exposure. So this has become more reading back into the old cards that didn't know of it at the time, but they've gone back in other stories to explain some of the lore using some of these newer explanations for older groups. And so here, enchanted creature has infect. Perfection is at hand. You have been freed of weakness and made complete. That's from Shieldred. And again, Shieldred, the Whispering one, is the version here. There's been a more powerful Shieldred card that's come out since, very infamously. Here's the Phyrexian Crusader. So the Mirrodin Crusader, like I said, playing off the old white and black knights, it's got its counterpoint. Here's the Phyrexian Crusader. And this is your 2/2 for 3 with first strike instead of double strike. So that's a bit of a reduction. But it's got protection from red and white, the 2 colors that were least affected by Phyrexia in the first set. And Infect. So again, Infect is Pretty strong, especially when you're dealing with first strike. You get those counters onto your opponent's creature before it can deal damage back. This guy was definitely fearsome in infect decks. Having protection from 2 colors would help it get through. It was hard to deal with. Red and white are 2 cards that have decent removal usually. Yeah, I do like the Mirrodin Phyrexian Crusaders and made use of both, but I did make more infect decks generally. I found it to be quite a strong and interesting mechanic. And even now it can take people by surprise. Where are we? Phyrexian Rager. Now this is a reprint going back to what? Apocalypse? I think something like that. Maybe Invasion. 2/2 for 3. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose a life. I believe many worlds will bow to Phyrexia. Mirrodin is merely the first. And they did try to go after many worlds when they got opportunity to.
Ow.
Here's a Phyrexian Vat Mother. 5/4 for 4. That was the old Ernhend Jin stats. But this sucker has Infect. And at that, it's going to need a downside. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you get a poison counter. That can be troublesome, but this is a big infecty body for a fairly efficient price at the time, especially given...
You get a poison counter, and you get a poison counter.
Yeah. So, wasn't my favorite, but it was one I did tinker with at times. Now here's one of the few Mirrans in black left, the Sangromancer. A 3/3 flyer for 4. Whenever a creature an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may gain 3 life. Whenever an opponent discards a card, you may gain 3 life. So, interesting to have. Oh, well, black has always had life gain as part of it, right back to Drain Life and El Hajj Shah from Arabian Nights with early life link type abilities. So, or Spirit Link, as the case may be. But this is a little different way to do it. And, yeah, I think you could do worse. But there's a lot of interesting vampires out there now. Well, vampires were a group that grew very slowly as a tribe until they really took off. Was it Zendikar? Might have been. But yeah, ever since there's been quite a few of them around. Scourge Servant, 5 cost 3/3 with Infect. Pretty basic, but it's a common zombie, and that's what it is. Union of the Oil and Necrogen has produced many pleasing reactions.
I'm sorry, I was really, really tired today.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned before that I used to like using Swarmyard for my black-themed Infect decks especially. And here's another one. A Rat for 2/2 for 3 with Infect. And whenever Septic Rat attacks, if defending player is poisoned, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it can become a 3/3 Infect if you've already snuck a hit in previously, which is a little bit more threatening. Then you've got Spread of the Sickness. Poor beast down there. Life is ephemeral. Phyrexia is eternal. Destroy target creature, then proliferate. But it costs 5. So, again, adding something like proliferate or draw a card, they have to increase the cost of things, generally speaking, pretty high. Virulent Wound. Put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. When that creature is put into a graveyard this turn, its controller gets a poison counter. So, you can off a 1 toughness creature and give your opponent a poison counter at instant speed for 1 black mana. Yeah, I used to use this at times. And even if you can't do that, there's other ways to make good use of this little thing too. It just takes a little bit more setup. It's rarely useless. unless your opponent has no creatures. But there aren't a ton of decks like that around these days. Sadly, the extent of Greg's healing knowledge was, don't pick at it.
I'll plug this in, just so it doesn't die. I'm going to go to the other room, just because I'm yawning and sneezing and all kinds of stuff.
Right. So we got a Blister Stick Shaman. Oh, yeah, sparkles. Thank you. Is a Goblin Shaman, 2/1 for 3. And when it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Protective Warren requires a good deal of prodding. And again, Mirrodin Goblin. Goblins are usually not too picky about who they fight, but in extreme cases, they did tend to realize that the Phyrexians were a bigger threat. Burn the Impure. 2-cost instant. Deals 3 damage to target creature. If that creature has Infect, Burn the Impure deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. Flame doesn't kneel to Phyrexia. Unfortunately, since it only did damage to creatures, it's not as versatile as other 1/2 cost red cards that deal damage to things. Now we've got a Concussive Bolt for 5. Deals 4 damage to target player. Metalcraft, if you control 3 or more artifacts, creatures that player controls. And I can't block this turn. This is generally not very good. Only to a player not being able to deal with the threat of a creature unless you're just stopping them from blocking so you can swing in. This is a shock one, all the rest. It's a pretty thematic card, but for the cost of it, those effects are just a little too narrow to really be worth it most of the time. Then for the Mirrans, we have here Crush. 1 red, destroy target non-creature artifact. So even more specific than the good old Shatter, but half the cost. So there you go. A Golem's Hands, no tenderness was the text on that one. And then we've got the Galvanoth, 3/3 for 5. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may look at the top card of your library. If it's an instant or sorcery card, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. A lot of red likes big X spells, though, so... But there are other big red spells that you could get some work out of this, but it is a 5-cost 3/3 that's hard to protect, generally. It chews open Mirrodin's husk and feeds on the outpouring of energy. Next we have a Gnathosaur, a lizard. Now this was still back in the day when dinosaurs were a very rare creature type in Magic. I mean, you had them back in Ice Age and Pygmy Allosaurus and things, but it wasn't the direction they really wanted to go. They liked beasts and things instead, usually. But that did change over time, and now dinosaurs are everywhere, and I'm not a huge fan of that, but... So here's sacrifice an artifact. It gains trample until end of turn, and it's only a 5/4 for your 6 mana. This was never very good. It gives you an outlet to sacrifice artifacts, but yeah. Mirrodin creatures that could withstand the Phyrexian oil found an abundance of crunchy snacks. I think that was one of the creatures that was shown dead on its side on one of the black cards, though, so not entirely immune. Goblin War Driver, 2 red for a 2/2 with Battlecry. A true warrior fights with whatever's handy. You know, I remember when a 2/2 Goblin for 2 with Upside would have been absolutely unthinkable. Most goblins were 1/1s. Some of them had upside, some of them had downside. And yeah, Goblin Hero was a 2/2 for 3 with no upsides. So then we have Hellkite Igniter. 7 mana for a 5/5 flying haste. So at least it can attack as soon as it enters. And you can pay 2 to give it +X+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control. Its flight sets the sky itself on fire. So again, now that they've got treasure tokens and food tokens and things all over the place, this has a potentially a bit more of an upside. But when you had to cast every single artifact, they did limit things like this a little bit more. It's still not a great card because it is somewhat fragile, but it can come down and have an impact if unchecked.
I like it.
Then we've got a Hero of Oxidia Ridge. This is one of the ones I had trouble hunting down. 4/2. Yeah, it's definitely an intimidating dragon.
I mean the dragon I like.
Yes, that's what I said. It's an intimidating dragon, not the knight I'm holding right now. Anyway, 4/2 for 4. Haste. So again, it can come down with immediate attacking. Battle Cry. And whenever a hero attacks, creatures with power 1 or less can't block this turn. So if your opponent had a lot of 1/1 infect creatures, this could go right past them and they can't get in the fight and gum things up. Into the Core, exile 2 target artifacts for 4 as an instant. This is almost like the good old Dust to Dust, which was, I think, a sorcery speed for 2 white and 1 back in the dark. This is cost 4, but being able to exile 2 artifacts at once is pretty good. And Dust to Dust might have actually been Birdie. I don't actually remember now. But yeah, definitely had its use, and I used this on occasion. They believe they're driving us back, but we're leading them to their doom. Kethek Furnace Stoker. And again, right down to the core. That's where Karn went to try and face the Praetors, was in the inner parts of the planet, or the plane. And unfortunately, they were down there too. Koth's Courier. 3/2 Forest Walk, interestingly. I don't see that as much anymore, especially on a red creature. 4/3. Koth sent partisans to the Tangle to bring survivors to the safe haven of the tunnels below Koldutha. And again, green, the Tangle, was one of the more infected areas. Koldutha Flame Fiend, 6 cost, 4/4. And when it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice an artifact. If you do, it deals 4 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures or players. An uncommon, a little underpowered, but, having that ability to sacrifice for extra impact when it comes down is nice. But again, it requires having those extra artifacts around, which wasn't as easy back then. Koldutha Ringleader. Being surrounded by goblins is less objectionable when they're fighting for you. I would imagine so. Giant Berserker. 4/4 for 5. Battle Cry. And attacks each turn Fable. Then we've got Metallic Mastery. This is Phyrexian in red. Gain control of target artifact until end of turn. Untap that artifact. It gains haste until end of turn. So again, depending on the artifact you're going for, that thing in its hand looks like a ratchet bomb. But all will be reforged in the fires of glory. Umbrask the Hidden. Next, we've got Ogre Resistor. 4 cost for a 4/3. He didn't have a word for home, but he knew it was something to be defended. Just an ogre that doesn't like all these things taking over everything. And we're down to our last few red cards here. Rally the Forces. Attacking creatures get +1 attack and gain first strike until end of turn as an instant for 3. Drive them back. Make their underworld into their grave. Koth of the Hammer. Koth was an interesting planeswalker. I don't hear a lot of him anymore. I wonder what happened in the years I was away. Red Sun Zenith. Only cost 1 red and X. Red Sun Zenith does X damage to target creature or player. If a creature dealt damage this way would be put into the graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So sort of like Disintegrate. And then shuffle it back into owner's library. So extra effective Disintegrate in many ways. I did run Red Sun Zenith in some of my decks that liked Fireball setups. Perhaps a big mana elf deck, something like that. Slag Storm. 3 costs. Choose one. It deals 3 damage to each creature or 3 damage to each player. So the fact that you've got the choice makes a difference, but as long as we have the will to fight, we are never without weapons. And finally, wrapping up red here, we have the Spiraling Duelist. 3/1 for 4, Metalcraft. It has double strike as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. And with 3 power, double strike does make it into something of a threat. I never moved the same way twice. Those rotters can't grasp chaos. Now this one, I remember caught my attention back in the day. Because being a 2/4 for 4 with reach, that's straight up a giant spider. And they gave it infect on top of that. So this is, another example of power creep, obviously. Giant Spider was borderline playable depending on the format if you're just, casual games back in the day. But just to take that as the baseline and then add infect on top of it, again, makes this a much more threatening blocker to flying creatures, especially big ones, and gives it more of a threat if you decide to swing in as well. I did run into a couple of decks that ran those. Next, we have Creeping Corrosion. Destroy all artifacts for 4. So basically, this was similar to the old Shatterstorm, which I think is the same for red, except it's Bury instead of Destroy, which is a little outdated. We will reveal the futility of their heresy by showing them how fragile their relics are. Still, can be a handy toolbox card for green in the right situations or against the right opponents. Then we have Fangren Mauler. 5/5 for 6. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you gain 5 life. Fangren fight without comfort of any kind. We can ask no less of ourselves. So again, there we have a Mirrodin Beast for 6. But its bonus basically comes down to more life gain, which doesn't impact the board directly, generally speaking. Galisa's Courier. So this is sort of a counterpart to the Koth. So 2/3 for 3, and with Mountain Walk. So the survivors from Oxidia Ridge are on the move. Let them come and witness predation in its purest form. Always been a bit of a rivalry between red and green when it comes to ferocity. Green Sun Zenith. I recall this one being quite popular for a time. Search your library for a green creature card with convert a mana cost X or less. Put it onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library and Green Sun Zenith into its owner's library. So again, Phyrexian, but it's a tutor for a creature of given cost, and it only is 1 green and X, so it did have its use to go find what you needed. As the green sun crowned, Phyrexian prophecies glowed on the Tree of Tales. So again, the Tree of Tales was that central to the story artifact land from back in Mirrodin block. So it's showing sort of the heart of the green culture at the time had been taken over. Lead the Stampede. 3-cost sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal any number of creature cards from among them and put the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So you could get some serious card advantage out of this if you could time it right with what opponent was doing. Malira's Keepers, Mirrodin. Again, a bit of a rarity in green. Malira's Keepers can't have counters placed on it, so that helps it deal with infect things, but it's only a 4/4 for 5. Her warriors are the last defense against the coming storm. So they were adapting to some of the Phyrexian tactics. And Mirrodin Metal. 1 green. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Metalcraft. That creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn instead if you control 3 or more artifacts. Now, you might want to keep your artifacts handy in the early game and whatnot. So, again, Metalcraft isn't too hard to activate. It makes a big difference, though, whether this is +2/+2 or +4/+4. Still, a 1-cost instant combat trick is usually handy enough. And we're on to the Phyrexian Hydra. 7/7 for 5 with Infect. If damage would be dealt to Phyrexian Hydra, prevent that damage. And put a -1/-1 counter on Phyrexian Hydra for each 1 damage prevented this way. Again, these big bruiser infect creatures were not the way I usually went when I was building an infect deck. I would want cheaper, quicker infect creatures that I could then pump or do other tricky things or make unblockable with, things like that. Or a big non-infect creature sometimes that I could make infect if it looked like it might get 10 damage. Or the equivalent if you had previous counters. Anyway, Pistis Strike. 3-cost instant. Destroy target creature with flying. Its controller gets a poison counter on each. What okay. I lost it for a second there. Pistis Strike. Destroy target creature with flying. Its controller gets a poison counter. Period. So there's no on each. But yeah, just swarm the flying creature, be it dragon, be it whatever, and get rid of that with all the bugs. Even a nuisance such as the Pistis Fly had a purpose in our new world. Then we've got the Plague Maw Beast. Sacrifice a creature to proliferate. 4/3 for 5. Again, repeatable proliferate sources are handy, but this one, the cost was up there and it is fragile. Phyrexia's spiral of consumption grows wider and darker. Then we've got Praetor's Council. So this is again the Praetor speaking with Karn, who's stuck in there. 8 cost. Return all cards from your graveyard to your hand, Praetor's Council. Exile Praetor's Council. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. You know, when you're playing 8 cost spells, they should have big swinging effects. As the Phyrexian contagion corroded Carden's body, the Praetors whispered psalms to corrupt his mind. Again, they saw how powerful he was, and they wanted to control him, yes, but more than that if they could. Then Vornklax removed its teeth so it wouldn't waste time chewing before moving to the next kill. 8/8 for 7. You know, you look at the old scaled worm and thing, which was, you know, supposedly an upgrade over the craw worm for 8. That was a 7/6 creature instead of the 6 for a 6/4. This sort of falls in line with that philosophy, except slightly improved for the times. They've since done even crazier things. Rot Wolf. 3 cost 2/2 with Infect. And whenever a creature dealt damage by Rot Wolf this turn is put into a graveyard, you may draw a card. So extra upside onto your 2/2 for 3 Infect. And again, this is one that I did play with at times. I think it mainly got phased out, just because the 3 cost was a little bit slower than I wanted in most of my green decks, but I think it might have still been there a little bit. Tangle Mantis is an insect, 3/4 trample for 4. And again, decent sized body for a 4-mana creature, 3/4 with trample. The fiercest hunters in the Tangle don't seek out the mantises. They are mantises. They are the mantises. So yeah, again, one of the creatures that hung on there for a while. Thrun the Last Troll. Now this one is sort of a take off of the old Troll Ascetic from back in Mirrodin block, which was a 3/2 for 3, including 2 green, which couldn't be the target of things and could regenerate, so was a little bit difficult to deal with. Thrun the Last Troll here, they've sort of given him a buff and made him legendary, so instead of a 3/2 for 3, it's a 4/4 for 4, and it can't be countered. And it can't be the target of spells or abilities opponents control. And it still regenerates for the 2 mana, same as Troll Ascetic, I believe. His crime was silence, and now he suffers it eternally. So, Mirren, the troll, didn't stand up when things were looking bad, and now things are looking very bad. And he's more increasingly alone, whether he wants to be or not. But even regeneration doesn't work well against -1/-1 counters. Unnatural Predation. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. A little tiny combat trick. I'd still much rather have +2/+2 most of the time than +1/+1 and trample. But there are cases where it's better. +3/+3 for 1 green is the standard from way back in Alpha. So, domination by the strongest. That is all that matters in the Tangle now. From Vornklax. Now, the elves really did. Elves, again, such a nature-loving people on most planes. They were always a little bit warped on Mirrodin, where everything was so artifact-heavy and metal. But they sure They sure were heavily influenced by the Phyrexians. Here's another 2/2 for 3 infect, but when this enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact. So it's got that also anti-artifact element for extra value, most of the time anyway. And I usually enjoyed running those in at least a copy or two in a green infect deck for the extra value if I was running into artifacts. Here's a 2/1 for 2. Radiant emissaries put into a graveyard from the battlefield. You may search your library for a basic land card and put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So it's an emissary of sorts, but it does take some time to get the extra value out of it. Now here, again, art is different from the regular version, but this is the other pre-release card, and this is the Phyrexian one. So, again, same date, 30th of January. And this is Glisa the Traitor. 2 green and a black for a 3/3 for a strike, death touch. And whenever a creature an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So yeah, this is when an elf embraces the changes of Phyrexia. I forget if Glisa was entirely willing at first or not, but she definitely latched onto it in the end. Zombie elf. Very much on the Phyrexian side. And that death touch does combo nicely with first strike if it actually gets into combat. Now here we have, again, Tezzeret the Seeker was the one from Shards of Alara. Here we have Tezzeret, Agent of Bolas. 4 mana and 2 colors, whereas the original Tezzeret the Seeker was a 5 mana Planeswalker that was only in blue. So this one has a +1, starts with 3 loyalty of look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it directly into your hand and put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So it helps see through people. Whenever target artifact, -1, target artifact becomes a 5/5 artifact creature. So it can be somewhat aggressive. If you've got other artifacts around, drop it for 4, and you can use one of its 3 to make an artifact big for a swing if you need it. You can't use that defensively particularly, though. Oh, no, wait a second. Yeah, it's not the end of turn, so you could if you wanted to have an artifact sitting there waiting to block. But target player loses X life and you gain X life, where X is twice the number of artifacts you control. That is a decent ultimate. It's not as strong as some. I don't remember Tezzeret Agent of Bolas ever really taking off the way some things did. But there we go. Next, we're into artifacts. So we got some constructs going around here. This one with some white influence, 2/4. And you can have it gain vigilance until end of turn for a white, for 4. The Mirrodin partisans created hundreds of patrol sentinels to divert Phyrexian assaults from the tangle. And here's a big beastie. Now, I brought out a few other cards from other sets for comparisons when we get into some of these artifacts. For years, the Darksteel Colossus had been a favorite Tinker target. 11/11 trample, indestructible. If it would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal it and shuffle it into owner's library instead, so you can get back into your deck. Yeah, it's definitely been a popular one, and it still is to a certain extent. However, it's largely been replaced by this new version. And that is the Blightsteel Colossus, which came out about 7 years later. So normally adding 1 to the casting cost of a creature is a big deal. However, in this case, it proved to not be that big a difference. Usually you weren't hard casting this anyway. You were using something like Tinker or other things to play it. But the base effects are very similar. This is an 11/11 trample, now with Infect as well. And again, 10 poison counters will kill someone, so this could kill you in 1 swing, whereas this typically took 2 in a 20-life match, or longer other ways. And again, still indestructible. So, and still with the shuffle back into owner's library clause. So basically a corrupted version of the Darksteel Colossus. Very powerful, very deadly. And so, well, I used to run one of these and then another artifact creature with Shroud as Tinker targets for options. That one got replaced with the Blightsteel Colossus basically as soon as I had one. Next we have the Bone Horde, which is a living weapon. So put a 1/0/0 black germ token and attach this to it. An equipped creature gets +X/+X, where X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards. So, and then it costs 2 to equip to something else if you'd rather have it on something else. If the game's gone long, that could be quite powerful. However, it's still a 4-cost enchantment that doesn't do much immediately. Sounds like Salem's wanting to come in.
I'll get him.
And then we got the Brass Squire. So here's a mirror. Attached target equipment you control to target creature you control. So there's made a few equipments over the years that are really big and have high equip costs. This is a way around it, but you're basically forced into using this rather fragile artifact creature, 1/3 for 3. Generally not what you want to be doing, especially since it can't even tap the turn it comes into play. I admire it. Few pull off pluck and subservience at the same time. Alright. Next we have a Copper Carapace. So equipped creature gets +2/+2 and can't block. Equipped for 3 and only costs 1 to play. It's harder to put on than it is to create or come across. We will fight as they do, our flesh protected behind metal. And that's from a Mirrodin Weaponsmith. I was playing on the Switch while watching, and this was one of my favorite sets I bought for myself. I had a nasty poison counter deck. Yeah, I had fun with poison counter decks back in the day. I made basically separate green and black ones that approached the topic in somewhat different ways. I even experimented with sort of a white and blue control poison thing. That one never really took off, but there were some interesting ideas. Core Prowler. 2/2 for 4 with Infect. When it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, proliferate. Just to, keep that going for longer if they can. Now, there's another one that I wanted to show sort of the changing over the years. Darksteel Plate was popular at one point for Commander. Darksteel Plate is indestructible. Equipped creature is indestructible. Costs 3, 2 to equip. If there can be no victory, then I will fight forever. Koth of the Hammer. So I want to compare this to where we came from and where it's gone since. So, Shield of Kaldra was from Darksteel in the original Mirrodin block, which was the first to include equipment. So this was another equipment that sort of was my first exposure to equipments that just made things indestructible. And so it cost 4, you could equip for 4. Equipped creature was indestructible. And then equipment named the 3 pieces, the sword, shield, and helm of Keldra, are indestructible. So it did make itself indestructible as well, along with the other pieces. So Darksteel Plate, they reduced the casting cost by 1. They reduced the equip cost by 2. And it is just straight out indestructible, and equipped creature is indestructible. So that is definitely more efficiently costed by that comparison. Now, if we throw in the most recent version I can remember, the Mithril Coat, 3 cost, legendary, just like the Shield of Keldra was legendary. This one is not, but that matters very little these days. Legendary artifact equipment, flash. So you could cast this in as an instant if one of your creatures is in trouble. Indestructible. And when Mithril Coat enters the battlefield, you may attach it to a legendary creature you control. So as an instant, it can just come down if one of your legendary creatures is in trouble and give it indestructible. Yeah, equipped creature has indestructible. And we'll see where that goes. But this definitely brings it down so that you can equip it for free. You can play it as an instant, and it does largely the similar sort of effect again. The actual cost is less, because it costs the same to play, but 1 less to equip if you're just using it on a regular creature. But it's that clause for legendary that makes it potentially more efficient option, probably why it's so popular. A lot of people like to make their commander indestructible. But, like I said, this is part of a series of equipment that have been doing that for a long time, and they try and improve and tweak where they can. So the earlier ones do seem better. Yeah, deck building is always fun if you can get a group of friends together to play. And again, we used to do big multiplayer games long before there were Commander or 100 card singleton stuff. Decimator Web. 4 cost, 4 and tap to activate. Target opponent loses 2 life, gets a poison counter, and then puts the top 6 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So just multiple small pains. Minkosynth grew unfettered beneath the black lacuna, metastasizing into a matrix of noxious energy. So again, yeah, Minkosynth was sort of a regional thing, but man, lots of things sort of flourished under Phyrexia's influence. Dross Ripper is a 3/3 for 4. Pay 3. Dross Ripper gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So again, pumpable, but expensive to do so. Such a creation serves no purpose other than exterminating every one of us. Neurok Strategist. Yeah, they were seeing lots of very threatening creatures and things going on here. Next, we've got the Flare Husk. Again, a living weapon. Costs only 1, though. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, and you can pay 2 to equip it to something else. So, this had a different sort of approach. It was a 1-drop. Would come in as a 1/1, and then what do you do with it next? It does have fairly low cost and creates a body, but I don't remember exactly how it was used, to be honest. I think it did have potential, though. Then we've got the Gust Skimmer, a 2/1 for 2, and you can have it gain flying until end of turn. Phyrexian smog clouds choked the skies, threatened creatures who couldn't comprehend the menace below. All right. Next we've got a Hexplate Golem. Just a big old 5/6 for, 5/7 for 7. Use everything. Iron, rust, scrap, even the ground must join our cause. Izuri Renegade Leader. We saw him in the previous set. But it's basically just a common big old golem. These, on the other hand, you could combo off with a bit easier. Amazing flavor text on this set. Yes, a lot of it is, and very good for the storytelling motif. They've gotten away from that in a lot of newer sets, as far as I can tell. They tend to focus, especially with Universes Beyond, on the characters, certain events, but not the overarching story so much. And I think it's a loss. I see that even in their own, their own IP stories as well. So, our glorious infection has taken hold. Elishnorn Grand Cenobite, an Ichor wellspring, coming out of the ground in the plains there. When it enters the battlefield or is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. So, again, this just gives you an artifact. You play it for 2, draw a card, and then sacrifice it to something to draw another card on top of what other effect you're getting for that. So, these pockets of corruption springing up all over the place. Not a good sign for the plane itself. The knowledge pool, 6 cost, imprint. When it enters the battlefield, each player exiles the top 3 cards of his or her library. Whenever a player casts a spell from his or her hand, that player exiles it. If the player does, he or she may cast another non-land card exiled with knowledge pool without paying the card's mana cost. So it's a way to trick out the bigger ones by discarding other things, but it does take time and it's somewhat vulnerable. I don't remember it ever being a huge thing, although I'm sure some people have pulled off some neat tricks with it. 4/4 flyer for 6, not great costing. Anything that watches without sleep and fights without fear is valuable. Ally against the Phyrexians. So that pretty much sums that one up. And we've got a Magnetic Mine. 4 cost. Whenever another artifact is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, Magnetic Mine deals 2 damage to that artifact's controller. And then we have Mirror Works. 5 cost. Whenever another non-token artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2. If you do, put a token that's a copy of that artifact onto the battlefield. So it lets you double things up in certain conditions. The face of Geth's corpse dredgers are disturbingly similar. Next, we've got a Mortopod, another living weapon. Costs 2 to play, 2 to equip. Equipped creature gets +1 toughness and has sacrificed this creature. This creature deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So, again, I remember it. I always liked Timmy type effects where you could deal damage targeted to things. This cost on that one's pretty high, but I think there were tricks to it. It's been a while. Next, we have a Mirror Sire, which is a 1/1 for 2. When Mirror Sire is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter. What was I saying? I'm getting tired. When a Mirror Sire is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token onto the battlefield. So when it dies, you get another mirror to replace it. was getting it mixed up with something else. But again, this was giving you these little cheap artifacts, the Ichor Wellspring, that you could sacrifice for value and either replace itself with another token creature, you draw a card, things like that. This set up a lot of these engines that required artifact sacrifices. Mirror Turbine. So for 5, you can tap it to put a colorless mirror artifact creature token onto the battlefield, or tap 5, untap mirrors in this. Search your library for a mirror creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. And that's, again, without spending mana on it. About the biggest mirror you could find was a mirror battle sphere. And, you know, it was a threat, and it created more tokens for you. Mirror Welder. 3 for a 1/4. Imprint, target exile an artifact card from a graveyard if my welder has all activated abilities of all cards exiled with it. So, again, a way to get abilities transferred from other artifact cards, but they have to be in a graveyard, so definitely it takes a little while to set up. Memnarch designed some mirror to follow the leaders and reaffix lost parts. Mirror and partisans put that instinct to good use. Follow the levelers and reaffix lost parts. All right, because, yeah, I almost forgot about the levelers. Now, this was another one of a pair that they made for this set. So there was the Peace Strider for the Mirrans. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life, 3/3 for 4. The Vanished must have sent it from beyond to aid us in the struggle. So that's an interesting construct. I forget what the backstory on those is. The Phyrexian Ingester is another construct. 2/1 for 3 with Infect. That's about as plain Jane as you can get. Our cause will ripen in the fertile flesh of the unworthy. Shieldred the Whispering One. So there you go. More infection and spreading of things through that. It's a very common theme here. Phyrexian Juggernaut. So if you remember the old Juggernaut from back in the day, and I think was reprinted in one of the Mirrodin sets earlier, was a 5/3 for 4. This is a 5/5 Infect for 6, and it attacks each turn of Fable. I think the other one did the same, except it had claws about walls, couldn't block it. When nature impedes, Phyrexia overcomes. There's a Phyrexian Revoker. 2/1 for 2. When Phyrexian Revoker enters the battlefield, name a non-land card. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name can't be activated. So another way to lock down, sort of like Pithing Needle, certain cards. Not in this case that can't be played, but you can't use the activated abilities. So I do remember that one getting some interest for sideboards and things. Zombified. Here's the counterpoint to the Peace Strider, the Pierce Strider. 4 cost 3/3. When Pierce Strider enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 3 life. Pain isn't a negative stimulus. Pain is a sign of your imperfection. Quote from Shieldred. Now this one is just a goofy good time. We got the Piston Sledge. So a sledgehammer with steam power that just goes nuts. Goblin seems to like it. Only the goblins could make a simple machine so complex. You know, a hammer. There you go. 3 cost Equip it by sacrificing an artifact. And equipped creature gets +3/+1. When it enters the battlefield, you may attach it to target creature you control. So basically, when you play it, just have something in mind to attach it to, because you're going to have to sacrifice extra artifacts if you don't. Here's the Plague Mirror. Taps for a colorless mana instead of all the regular ones that can tap for the different colors. And it's a 1/1 infect for 2. So again, 2-drop, 1 cost infect. This one being a mirror and an artifact is a little bit awkward in its uses sometimes, but then we've got, this is again, I didn't find the unoriginal version, I just grabbed a reprint with the same sort of flavor text. The border's a little different, as you can see. So 5 cost for a Psychosis Crawler. Artifact creature horror. Psychosis Crawler's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So, yeah, it's got one of these variable power and toughness things that's a little awkward to work with. But again, whenever you have these triggers for whenever you draw or something basic like that, each opponent loses a life, those sorts of things can add up. You get decks that use all sorts of things like that. Yeah, the horrors definitely can be quite creative in their artwork. And where's that flavor text? If that brain can't figure out the secret of the serum, then add more brains. That's simple when you're just splicing things together to try to make something work better. Razorfield Rhino from the Mirrodins. 4/4 for 6. Metalcraft. It gets +2/+2. So it could be a 6/6 for 6. Adapted to tread on razor grass, the Rhino proved adept at treading on Phyrexians as well. Yeah, any big beastie could be handy. Then we've got the Rusted Slasher. Sacrifice an artifact to regenerate it. 4/1 for 4. Again, another little sacrifice outlet, but regeneration's always been a little bit awkward. It's a beautiful vision, especially with so many -1/-1 counters around. This thing is more frail than you might think. Discarded debris is reborn as a singular entity. Umbrask the Hidden. Shimmer Mirror is always fun. 2/2 for 3 flash. You may cast artifact cards as those they had flash. So this guy was very handy if you're making an artifact theme deck. It evades Phyrexians by hiding in the space between seconds. Very quick. Yes, flash and all your other stuff gains flash. Makes for definitely a bit of a different playstyle. We got the Shriek Horn. 1 cost. Enters the battlefield with 3 charge counters on it. And tap it and remove a charge counter. Target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So it's a little cheaper, but at the same time, limited use for sort of a millstone effect. Then we got the Signal Pest. Can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach. And it's got the Battle Cry, so you can buff all your other stuff, even if it's not doing much on its own attacking. It leaps from tree to tree, reaching the enemy's positions. I do remember having some fun experimenting with things like that in the Shimmer Mirror. I did build... Was it around this time or was it substantially before? I forget exactly when I built that thing. But I did build a Karn Silver Golem deck for Elder Dragon Highlander, basically commander type deck rules back when If a card had a colored mana symbol on it, you couldn't use it at all if your commander didn't have that in his color identity, which of course Karn doesn't for any color. So it made the deck building a bit of a challenge. There's a lot more tools available for a colorless deck now, and ever since the Eldrazi came out, really. But so, silver skin armor. For 2, equipped creature gets +1/+1 and is an artifact in addition to its other types. Turning things into an artifact, there's a few benefits to that certain deck designs. Partisan spies warned that no armor would protect the body from Phyrexian infection. Nurok strategists took that as a challenge. So you can see the pride of the Nurok. They thought they could do anything. And they were able to do quite a bit, it's true. But then we've got the Skin Wing. 4-cost living weapon. So again, it makes a germ token to attach to. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has flying. 4 for a 2/2 flying is not wonderful, even if the equipment hangs around after the germ is killed. And then it costs 6 to attach to something else, which is just so much. I don't remember ever seeing it used effectively. Although, there are the things which can equip things for you. Sphere of the Suns, 2-cost. When it enters the battlefield, tapped with 3 charge counters on it. And you can tap it and remove a charge counter to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So basically, it's an artifact mana rock gemstone mine. You get your 3 uses for any color you want, and that's it. And then it's depleted unless you find a way to recharge those counters, which there are more ways now than there were when Gemstone Mine came out with light, that's for sure. Spin Engine. Target creature can't block Spin Engine this turn. 3/1 for 3, still pretty frail. It will be battle ready before our strike at Oxidia Ridge, and it will guarantee our victory. Then we've got the Spine of Ish-Sa. 7-cost. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target permanent. When the Spine of Ish-Sa is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return Spine of Ish-Sa to owner's hand. So, again, you can get it cycling with a lot of mana. If you bring it down, kill something, sacrifice it to something, goes back to your hand, play it again, kill something else. But, man, is that expensive. That said, artifacts are usually, there are lots of ways to generate extra mana. So another living weapon. Equipped creature gets +2/+4 and has reach. But it costs 5 and 4 to equip. Yeah, a lot of these living weapon things I don't find all that impressive. Now, here we get into an iconic piece. The Sword of Feast and Famine. And this sends signals, I tell you. The Sword of... from the first Dark Steel, they had the first 2, the Sword of Light and Shadow and the Sword of Fire and Ice. Both very nice. The ability here, +2/+2 and protection from 2 colors, in this case, white and black. Both strong creatures for removal, so this was quite protective. It only costs 2 to equip, 3 to use. And whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you gain 3 life, and you may return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Getting creatures back and gaining a bit of life is not bad. Sword of Fire and Ice, protection from red and blue. Again, red of popular removals color. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, it deals 2 damage to target creature or a player, and you draw a card, both very strong effects. Now, why I mean this sent a signal? Because these 2, like I said, were holding down the fort as the main ones for a long time, ever since Dark Steel. And then they continued this enemy color set in Scars of Mirrodin, and they made the blue-green one. blue-green one didn't quite hold up to these two. But then came Mirrodin Besieged and the Sword of Feast or Famine. So this one gave protection from black and green. As you can see, it's the Mirrans fighting against the Phyrexians here. So those are the two colors. Sort of like the Mirrodin Crusader had protection from. But again, you throw this on top of the Phyrexian Crusader, which already has protection from red and white, and you've got protection from every color all of a sudden, except for blue, which doesn't usually have a lot of removal spells outside of something like a Control Magic maybe, or the odd Psionic Blast, which almost never shows up. These were handy. You could do some pretty crippling boosting with them. And the abilities on this one, whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may discard a card. That player discards a card, and you untap all lands you control. That mana untapping, or land untapping, could be used for all kinds of effect. And making an opponent discard a card isn't too shabby either, unless they happen to all be in their hand. So this one was strong. This one was more comparable in its effect to these ones. I mean, the green and blue one wasn't horrible, for sure. But most people I know, it just was, you'd get a 2/2 bear or something, and the other effect usually didn't accomplish much helpful. So, but this not only sent the signal, oh, some of these are going to line up nicely, but it also clinched the idea, oh, they're trying to finish this set for sure, because they got the now 4 of the off-color combinations for the swords. So everyone started looking forward to whatever the next set was going to be. The only off enemy color combination that wasn't represented was white and red. Again, 2 colors that are both quite proficient in removing creatures. So people were anticipating whatever the sword that came next might be very strong. Turns out it was a little bit disappointing for most people, but this one really got people's attention that, oh, we're doing the cycle, and oh, this could be good. And this one was good. So it did hold up nicely with some of its predecessors, for sure. Those swords were very popular for a long time. They've fallen off a little bit now. Yeah, I specifically went and picked up a box of Dark Steel when I got the chance. Oh, this was 15 years or so ago, because I wanted to make sure I tried to get those swords, and that was just before this block came out. So when I saw them doing that in this block, I made an effort to get a good chunk of it, and that's why I have so much of this set as a base. And then I had to fill out a few holes. Was partially because of cards like the sword that I wanted to get a hold of. There were other things like the Mox Opal too, of course. But there were a lot of good stuff in this, and I liked the Infect theme. This block was very well done on a couple of levels. 5/3 for 5, and you can pay 3 to regenerate it. Tangle Hulk. A true Phyrexian predator. It will never know death, just as nature intended. I don't know if it's any easier to see than on foil. I always found this one a little bit convoluted, but it's basic. Then we've got our Thopter Assembly. 6 for a 5/5 flyer. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control no Thopters other than Thopter Assembly, return Thopter Assembly to its owner's hand and put 5 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. So, yeah, you could use this to make a bunch of tokens. And again, it's returning it to its owner's hand, so you could then recast it. And if you get low on Thopters, well, poof, 5 more. Titan Forge. 3 cost, pay 3 and tap it. put a charge counter on Titan Forge. Just tap it, remove 3 charge counters, and put a 9/9 colorless golem artifact creature token onto the battlefield. I'm not sure how well that's going to go, but it's an interesting idea anyway. And they tried, things like the Colossus of Sardia. The 9/9 artifact creature token is definitely reminiscent of that. But again, it's a lot of work to get there. I think I've seen it used, but not all that often. Then we've got a training drone, 4/4 for 3, and it doesn't attack or block unless it's equipped. So this again would be a sort of an equipment themed deck. Volshock Flail, Verdian Shield, Luxton Blade, Tezir, bring the Moriok Hook, and assemble the rookies. One way to train fighting. Next, we got the Verdian Claw. Equipped creature gets +1 attack and first strike. 2 to play, 1 to equip. The mistakes early in balancing things were things, the famous ones are things like the Bone Splitter. But even things like Lightning Greaves was too strong for, among those early equipment, nothing really could compete in its category. And then if you wanted power buffs, Bone Splitter was kind of like a new Rancor, except any color could use it. Next, we're getting into Contested Warzone. So here's a land that you can tap for a colorless mana. You can pay 1 and tap it. Attacking creatures get +1 attack until end of turn. Would be nice if we remembered and were focused on what we were doing at the time. And whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, that creature's controller gains control of Contested Warzone. So, yeah, this card gets a little bit political, and it's easy to drop in, but it's hard to figure out how to get the best use out of it sometimes. You really need to is this just one of those that's happy to be passed around and share the love? There's a bit more to it than that because it's based on being attacked. But next, we've got the Inkmoth Nexus, and this is a take off the old Blinkmoth Nexus, again from Darksteel. So, Blinkmoth Nexus was sort of like the old Mishra's Factory, except made for, the new age. The ties to Urz's and stuff is definitely seen in some of the design. So you can tap to add a colorless mana. You can pay 1 to make it a 1/1 Blinkmoth artifact creature with flying until end of turn. Still land. Or you can pay 1 and tap it to target Blinkmoth. Gets +1/+1 until end of turn. It could bump itself or another Blinkmoth. Then you've got the Inkmoth Nexus. Taps for a colorless or pay 1. Inkmoth Nexus becomes a 1/1 Blinkmoth artifact creature with flying and infect until end of turn. It's still a land. No pumping effect. But again, the tokens usually were a little bit more threatening with infect, either because with the flying and just the ability to show up, they could get through a bit more easily, or as a blocker that'll nerf your creature by giving it a -1/-1 counter after combat. And these good night, Abram. These actually worked fairly well together because even your Ink Moths with Infect could still be. Oh no! Wait a minute. Target Blink Moth, not Ink Moth. I was going to say they could pump. Oh no! It is still a Blink Moth. Sorry, for a second I thought it's Ink Moth Nexus, but no, the tokens are still Blink Moths. That's how I remember it working because you could, if you had these both, use the pump ability to make your infect the Blink Moths even more threatening. And then it's into the land cards. And most of these land cards, again, were extensions of the terrain. I don't know if I can show this that effectively here. Let's see. What's the easiest one to show this potentially? But basically, as I recall, they sort of extended the 4 art scenes from the previous set. So you would take the two of the panels from the previous set and 2 of these new panels, and you would have very corrupted sites showing up more in the landscape with the different sets there. So this was up to the end of Mirrodin Besieged, and again, you see the very contested, the very land itself is turned into this conflict between the native Mirrans. Native is a bit of a stretch because Memnarch, good old Memnarch over here, was pulling in people from all over the place. And again, the blur between metal and flesh. Memnarch was meant to be an overseer that I think Karn designed. And so, unfortunately, he was a little twisted due to some of the Phyrexian influence that people didn't realize was there or whatever. But, yeah, he was bringing other people to Mirrodin intentionally. And, but generally speaking, when I say the native Mirrans, the ones that were happy with the planet and happy with the plane and didn't want to see it taken over by Phyrexia, versus the Phyrexians. And this battle raged on through this set, and the next set's title in the block, you probably can tell which way things went, but is New Phyrexia. And way out, I never knew that. What do we not know? Anyway. But yeah, this story takes a dark turn. Phyrexia eventually takes over the plane of Mirrodin, and it's no longer Mirrodin, it becomes New Phyrexia. And then many years later, the stories continue, and Phyrexia finds ways to try to invade further out into the multiverse. And I think ultimately the plane gets phased out of existence by Teferi at some point or something way down the road, which, sort of contains the Phyrexians but doesn't destroy them or something. It's a long thing that they just love to milk the story from, but that's partially due to these foundations. And again, this wasn't the origin of Phyrexia. Those ideas go way back to some of the old antiquities cards and things, and things that were foreshadowed and built long ago, but they were more hinted at, and so they've had a chance to fill them out, and boy did they in this set. And I really enjoy exploring it, just like I do the older sets, like the Fallen Empires and things I used to collect. I think the block format is by far superior for storytelling, having interrelated themes that carry over from set to set. The way they do things now, where at most you get the odd sort of 2-set block, even that's pretty rare these days. Everything seems to be, a little bit of interconnected story. Oh, we had some Strixhaven students on a field trip to Lorwyn, and keeping things tied together that way. It just seems so weak compared to what they used to do. And yeah, I mean, this was a year's worth of 3 sets basically to make this block. And yeah, I mean, people were wondering how the battle was going to go at one point, and hoping that Mirrodin could be saved, because it was a popular plane. People loved the original Mirrodin. It introduced all kinds of cool things, not just the new frames, but equipment and return to artifact strategies. But yeah. Anyway, I guess this basically sums it up. I do need to get to bed, but for those who missed the premiere before this, I'll just share some of the hits that we got in here. I got some neat cards from Legends as well This was from Return to Lorwyn. Not at all related to this video, but I'll just thumb through these quickly if you care to see more. Some of these nice things that we got in on our mail day. I got a Valley of Gorgoroth there, the Wasteland. Yeah. Thanks for coming out, everybody. I really appreciate having someone to share this with, because I do. I like digging into these old sets and this old storytelling, and I think there's value in it. I wish they would do more of it these days. But yeah, good night, and I hope you all rest well, and keep us in mind for the third chapter when we finish out the block here in another week or two. It'll probably be next week, but who knows? Things may come up. We'll see. Have a good night, and yeah. I had a lot of fun reconstructing these sets. Even though they're not as old and classic as some of the old classic stuff that I prefer more, it's still, there was something to this time period in its storytelling. Have a good night. Thanks again for coming. And yeah, toodaloo, cheerio.
See you Thursday.
We'll see you Thursday. Let's flip it over this way so we can wave goodbye. You got a plan for Thursday?
Chaos Rising.
Chaos Rising. Hopefully it arrives in time.
Might be here tomorrow, actually.
Well, we'll see.
It was in Edmonton today.
So
yay!
Yeah. New set, always fun. Anyway, good night.
See you later.
And yeah, try not to have nightmares of the creepy things taking over the world. Sorry. Maybe shouldn't be doing this in the evening. I don't know. Bye for now.
You gotta do it from your side.
Oh,
I'll block the camera.
This?
Yep.
Bye.